Happy Monday! Today we are going to be reading Chapter 3 of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is the second book in the Chronicles of Narnia. I apologize for not reading chapters pretty consistently. I'm going to try to do it. I'm going to try to do at least one every day. That's my goal this week. One every single day this week. Today's chapter is titled Edmund and the Wardrobe. Now remember, there are 4 kids: Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. Lucy ended up finding the wood of Narnia through the wardrobe. She met Mr. Tumnus. Mr. Tumnus got her back. She comes back into the old house where they're staying, and everyone's like, "Yeah, you've been here the whole time. We didn't know you were gone." And she's like, "I've been gone for hours." Okay. Edmund in the wardrobe. Lucy ran out of the empty room into the passage and found the other 3. "It's all right," she repeated. "I've come back." "What on earth are you talking about, Lucy?" asked Susan. "Why," said Lucy in amazement, "haven't you been wondering where I was?" "So you've been hiding, have you?" said Peter. "Poor old Lou, hiding and nobody noticed. You'll have to hide a little longer if that's how you want people to start looking for you." "But I've been away for hours and hours," said Lucy. The others just stared at one another. "Batty," said Edmund, tapping to his head. "Quite batty." "What do you mean, Lou?" asked Peter. "What I said," answered Lucy. "It was just after breakfast when I went to the wardrobe, and I've been away for hours and hours and had tea, and all sorts of things happened." "Don't be silly, Lucy," said Susan. "We've only just come out of that room a moment ago, and you were just there then." "She's not being silly at all," said Peter. "She's just making up a story for fun. Aren't you, Lou? And why shouldn't she?" "No, Peter, I'm not," she said. "It's a magic wardrobe. There's a wood inside, and there's snowing. And there's a faun and a witch, and it's called Narnia. Come and see." The others did not know what to think, but Lucy was so excited that they all went back with her into the room. She rushed ahead of them, flung the door open to the wardrobe, and cried, "Now go! Go in and see for yourselves." "Why, you goose," said Susan, putting her head inside and pulling the fur coats apart. "It's just an ordinary wardrobe. Look, there's the back of it." Then everyone looked in and pulled the coats apart, and all they saw, Lucy herself even saw, a perfectly ordinary wardrobe. There was no wood, no snow, and only the back of the wardrobe with hooks on it. Peter went in and rapped his knuckles on it to make sure that it was solid. Like that. "A jolly good hoax, Lou," he said as he came out again. "You really have taken us in. I must admit, we have believed you." "But it wasn't a hoax at all," said Lucy. "Really and truly. It was all different a moment ago. Honestly, I promise." "Come on, Lou," said Peter. "That's going a bit far. You've had your joke. Hadn't you better drop it now?" Lucy grew very red in the face and tried to say something, though she hardly knew what she was trying to say, and she burst into tears. For the next few days she was very miserable. She could have made it up with the others quite as easily at any moment if she could have brought herself to say that the whole thing was only a story made up for fun. But Lucy was a very truthful girl, and she knew that she really was right, and she could not bring herself to say this. The others, who thought she was telling a lie, and a silly lie too, made her very unhappy. The 2 elder ones did this without meaning to, but Edmund could be spiteful, and on this occasion he was spiteful. He sneered and jeered at Lucy and kept on asking her if she found any other new countries and other cupboards all over the house. What made it worse was that these days ought to have been delightful. The weather was fine, and they were outdoors from morning to night, bathing, fishing, climbing trees, and lying in the heather, which are types of flowers. But Lucy could not properly enjoy any of it, and so things went on until the next wet day. That day, when it came to the afternoon and there was still no sign of a break in the weather, they decided to play hide and seek. Susan was it, and as soon as the others scattered to hide, Lucy went into the room where the wardrobe was. She did not mean to hide in the wardrobe, because she knew she would only set others talking again about the whole wretched business, but she did want to have one more look inside, for by this time she was beginning to wonder herself if Narnia and the faun had been a dream. The house was so large and complicated and full of hiding places that she thought she would have time to have one look in the wardrobe but then hide somewhere else. But as soon as she reached it, she heard steps in the passage outside, and there was nothing for it but to jump in the wardrobe and hold the door closed behind her. She did not shut it properly because she knew it'd be silly to shut oneself into a wardrobe, even if it wasn't a magic one. Now the steps she had heard were those of Edmund, and he came into the room just in time to see Lucy vanishing into the wardrobe. He at once decided to get in himself, not because he thought it was particularly a good idea to hide out, but because he wanted to go on teasing her about the imaginary country. He opened the door. There were coats hanging up as usual, and the smell of mothballs, and the darkness and silence, and there was no sign of Lucy. She thinks I'm Susan coming to catch her, thought Edmund to himself, so she's keeping very quiet in the back. He jumped up and shut the door, forgetting what a foolish thing it is to do. He began feeling around for Lucy in the dark. He had expected to find her in a few seconds, but was surprised when he did not. He decided to open the door again and let out some light, but he could not find the door either. He didn't like this at all and began groping wildly in every direction, and then he shouted out, "Lucy! Lou, where are you? I know you're here." Picture of Edmund in the closet with the coats. There was no answer, and Edmund noticed that his own voice has a curious sound, not the sound you'd expect in a cupboard, but a kind of open air sound. He also noticed that he was unexpectedly cold, and then he saw a light. "Thank goodness," said Edmund. "The door must have swung open on its own accord." He forgot all about Lucy and went towards the light, which he thought was the open door of the wardrobe, but instead of finding himself stepping out into the spare room, he found himself stepping from a shadow of some thick, dark fir tree into an open middle place of a wood. Where is it there? There was a crisp, dry snow under his feet and more snow lying on the branches of the trees. Overhead there was a pale blue sky, the sort of sky one sees on a fine winter day in the morning. Straight ahead of him, he saw between the tree trunks and the sun, Straight ahead of him, he saw between the tree trunks the sun, just rising, very red and clear. Everything was perfectly still, as if he were living in the country, as if he were the only living creature in that country. Even there was not even a robin or a squirrel among the trees, and the woods stretched as far as he could see in every direction. He shivered. He now remembered that he had been looking for Lucy, and how unpleasant he had been about her imaginary country, which now turned out to not have been imaginary at all. He thought she must be somewhere quite close and shouted, "Lucy! Lucy, I'm here too! Edmund!" There was no answer. "She's angry about all the things I've said lately," thought Edmund. And though he did not like to admit that he had been wrong, he also did not much like being alone in this strange, cold, quiet place. So he shouted again, "I say, Lou, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I seen how you're right all along. Please, come out. Make it Pax." Still, there was no answer. "Just like a girl," said Edmund, swallowing to himself, "sulking somewhere and won't accept an apology." He looked around again and decided not to like much of this place, and had almost made up his mind to go home when he heard, very far off in the distance, the sound of bells. He listened to the sound, and the sound came nearer and nearer, and at last there swept into the light a sledge drawn by 2 reindeer. The reindeer were about the size of Shetland ponies, and their hair was so white that even the snow hardly looked white compared to them. Their branching horns were gliding and shone like something of fire when the sunrise caught them. Their harness was of scarlet leather and covered with bells. On the sledge, driving the reindeer, sat a fat dwarf, who would have been about 3 feet high if he had been standing. He was dressed in polar bear's fur, and on his head he wore a red hood with a long gold tassel hanging down from its point. His huge beard covered his knees, and served him instead of a rug. But behind him, on the much higher seat in the middle of the sledge, sat a very different person, a great lady, taller than any woman that Edmund had ever seen. She was also covered in white fur up to her throat, and held a long, straight, golden wand in her hand, and wore a golden crown on her head. Her face was white, not merely pale, but white, like snow, or paper, or icing sugar, except for her very red mouth. It was a beautiful face in all other respects, but proud and cold and stern. Does she remind you of someone? Think about the last book. "Stop!" Oh wait, I missed something, sorry. The sledge was a fine sight, and it came sweeping towards Edmund with the bells jingling, and the dwarf cracking his whip, and the snow flying up on each side. "Stop!" said the lady, and the dwarf pulled the reindeer up so sharply that they almost sat down. They recovered themselves and stood chomping their bits and blowing. In the frosty air, the breath came out of their nostrils, looked like smoke. "And what, pray, are you?" said the lady, looking hard at Edmund. My name's Edmund," said Edmund rather awkwardly. He didn't like the way she looked at him. The lady frowned. Is that how you address a queen? She asked, looking sterner than ever. I beg your pardon, your majesty, I didn't know, said Edmund. Not know the Queen of Narnia, cried she. Ha! You shall know us better hereafter. But I shall repeat, what are you? Please, your majesty, said Edmund, I don't know what you mean. I'm at school. At least I was. It's the holidays now. And here's the picture. So you see the sleigh or the sledge. You've got the fat dwarf with his tassel and his little hat and his beard. A reindeer almost sitting because they came to that much of a stop. The queen, who is not necessarily given a name yet. And then you have Edmund here hiding in the bushes. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 3. Chapter 4 is titled Turkish Delight, and you'll have to check back in tomorrow. Love and support you. Happy Monday.